Okay. Let me start. All right. Good afternoon. How are we? Great. Okay. I hope you've had a great, interesting day. I didn't get to see all of the talks, but I do know the forum, and I love what the team has been doing and is doing. I'm a great supporter, and I'm glad to be back today. I'm going to top it off, hopefully in a good fashion. My name's Chantal Kerssens, and for the past 6 years, I've been working with companies and universities to develop mobile technologies for specifically older adults and their caregivers living at home, and more generally to develop technologies, mobile technologies for chronic disease management. So we're going to shift gears a little bit because my talk is not necessarily specifically focused on women, but I personally see firsthand this revolution, or let's call it innovation in healthcare. And both Dr. Park and the team and I thought it would be helpful to touch upon that a little bit today, so that hopefully next time you see a digital health application, you're not intimidated, you don't feel like this is something that doesn't apply to you, but rather that it is something that you can think about and or ask the right questions. So that is my goal for today. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about what is digital health, what's involved, some examples to illustrate some of the uses, and then move on to some of the advantages, some of the, I don't think there are necessarily disadvantages, but I think there are definitely questions and that you should ask yourself and or anyone, whether it's a provider or a commercial business that is offering an application. So those are more notes of caution. And then I'm going to finish up with a group here in town that's offering technology training. Should you be interested in learning more about how to use mobile technologies, I think this is a great group that would be happy to talk to you. All right, so what is digital health? In the way I see it and have experienced it, it's really managing symptoms when you have a disease or your own health when you are not necessarily symptomatic, managing symptoms and health using smartphones or a tablet in combination with the internet and connected devices. So who here is wearing an Apple Watch? A Fitbit? There you go. Okay. So those are devices that are helping track maybe not necessarily symptoms, but parameters of health. How many steps do you take? What is your heart rate? And lots more things. So that's how I see digital health. It is digital devices that are connected wirelessly and that you can use or are being used on the go. So that's on the one hand, the hardware, right? We have the cables that make up the internet. We have devices that you can wear on yourself, or maybe a weight scale that's sitting in a corner and that connects via Bluetooth, and then phones or tablets that play a role. Now so that's the hardware. The thing that makes these devices talk to each other are software applications, and really abbreviated, that's where the app comes in. So you have devices and hardware on the one hand, and then you have software that makes these devices and hardware talk to each other. And that's where the abbreviation app comes from. So for those of you who are not as familiar with a smartphone, why do we call a smartphone a smartphone? Why is it smart? Okay, so it does a lot more. When you think back to the old days, a phone was a phone, right? You would pick it up to make a phone call. Well, today, the phone is really, we call it a smartphone because it's doing a lot more. It has a calendar, you can take photos, you can watch videos, you can read the newspaper, you can do all sorts of things that we're used to doing in daily life. And you can also then, just over the past, I would say 5 years, there's been this explosion of developing these little, for those of you who are less familiar with a smartphone and using it in daily life, the little squares on the phone, those are the apps. And the minute you touch the app, it's doing something. It's telling you the weather, it's telling you the latest news on the elections and other good stuff. So similarly, over the past just 5 years, there's been an explosion of apps that have come out that relate to your health. And that's really what we're talking about here. And you can track all sorts of things. And what I want to talk to you about today is, I think there's a right place for digital health and these health applications. And I think there is not necessarily a wrong place, but again, there are some questions that you should ask yourself. All right. So I've touched upon it a little bit, but I just want to make sure that the picture is entirely clear, and it also leads into the next step of what are some of the advantages of digital health. So on the one hand, right, we have a mobile phone or a mobile technology that has the apps, and the apps is coordinating these different types of devices. So let's say I'm a heart failure patient and I need to monitor my weight every day, or I need to monitor my heart rate every day, or I'm a lung patient and I need to monitor the amount of oxygen in my blood. There are devices now that you can put on your hand or that you can pull from the corner of the room that if you activate the app on your phone, it will connect with the device and it will record automatically your weight or your blood glucose level or oxygenation. And the beauty of that is that you no longer have to get on a scale and record it yourself and then maybe forget all about it and forget the paper the next time you go to the doctor's office. The idea is that it's automatically recorded, it should reduce errors, and you can subsequently, it can be sent up to the cloud. We all hear about the cloud. Well, really, what is the cloud, right? It's a collection, again, it's hardware, and it's sitting somewhere. It's basically a collection of data centers that are sitting across the country and across the globe. And what it does, it stores data, it processes data, and it transmits data so that the data that you have recorded on your watch or on your scale at home is sent, for instance, to the doctor's office so that the doctor now, in real time, maybe with a little bit of a delay, but basically in real time, can see what your weight is. What is your blood glucose level? Is there potentially a concern? So you can see how there's a nice flow of information to a care provider. And similarly, this picture shows a care provider, but you can imagine that there is a family member that can be involved or a group of family members and friends that become a circle of care. And you can watch your own data over time and record it on a computer. Now, vice versa, let's say there is a concern, right? Your blood pressure is too high. You've gained too much weight in a short period of time, which can be a concern if you're a heart failure patient. So then the doctor can actually, by looking at your readings on a daily basis, you don't have to come into the office. They can actually see your readings and they can determine that maybe there's a risk. So now they can reach out to you using the same means and ping you and say, hey, we think it's wise to get on the phone, maybe have a consult in person or using a webcam, so the same type of technology. And very simply think of, medication reminders. I got this morning, I need to pick up certain prescriptions. And I love it. My pharmacy is sending me reminders because otherwise I will forget. So I think those are really some of the, you see an ecosystem almost that has a lot of potential to make things better and make us potentially healthier, or help us with our health and wellness, and help us with the care that we receive using digital health. Oops. All right, so some of the examples. I've already talked a little bit about the first bullet, chronic disease. So diabetes, heart disease, and we'll talk a little bit towards the end about dementia. But the idea is, and you got it, that you can manage symptoms and wellness using a digital health platform. So managing the symptoms. Similarly, there are more and more companies now that develop care coordination platforms. If you are a caregiver for a loved one with dementia, but also for other types of chronic diseases, you know how difficult it is and how tiring and how overwhelming, surely because of the number of tasks. And even if you were in the best possible shape, it is a lot to manage and multitask. So what you see now is digital health platforms that are being developed and commercialized that help with that, where it's almost like a social platform like Facebook, or maybe not Twitter, but a social platform where you can recruit a circle of friends and caregivers, and they all share part of the burden so that you don't have to feel so isolated and alone. And if there is something that prevents you from completing a task, maybe someone else can step in. And also, if the patient, him or herself, has completed a task, that person can be, the rest of the circle of friends or caregivers can make a positive comment, or you can earn maybe credit towards, your next visit. So these are some of the platforms, care coordination platforms, not just symptom management, that are emerging. We talked about medication refills, reminders, which I personally love. And then I think a huge opportunity is that you no longer, ideally, you can use this type of communication and technology so that you no longer have to come into a clinic. You will have to come in on occasion, and it's very important to see a clinical team and to meet with them face to face. But if for whatever reason you can't, or there is an emergency, there's now the opportunity to, just with the example that I used, when blood pressure may be elevated, that a care team can check in with a patient or a family without either party having to travel and meet each other in a physical location. And I think certainly in rural areas or underdeveloped areas, there's a huge opportunity and benefit there. I'm going to skip over to what I call entertainment. When I was with the previous company where we were developing specifically technology for older adults with dementia and their caregivers, it was fascinating to see how caregivers love, they're asking for the same types of games that you would play in the old days on, with physical materials, a deck of cards, completing a Sudoku in the newspaper. And there are all sorts of ways that you can use mobile technology and applications, apps, for doing the same types of activities. And you can even play online with your friends without being in the same location. And of course, an extension of that is brain games, and that could be the topic of a separate talk altogether. But the idea there is that it's very important, just like you need to exercise to keep your muscles in tone and to keep your heart healthy. Exercising the brain in whether it's by learning a different language or by playing these types of games and keeping yourself engaged and active and to socialize are very important aspects of brain health. And there's definitely science behind some of these games and platforms that will reinforce, I think, the benefit. And then finally, I want to point out what I call engagement, which is a topic that's dear to my heart because in my previous career, we were developing technology for older adults with dementia and using a tablet or mobile phone to meaningfully engage individuals who are limited, whether it's physically or mentally or both, cognitively, is very important. There is all sorts of data to show that one of the risks with dementia is that as people are more and more limited, they are by definition more limited to do things, and as a result they're understimulated and or bored. And so it's one of the explanations behind behavioral difficulties, people being aggressive, people being frustrated, and just think of yourself. If you're no longer able, after a very fruitful life, to do the things that you enjoyed and loved, I think, for me personally, I will be a very difficult dementia patient. So, I think, the beauty of mobile technology and having all these resources literally at the tip of your finger is that you can now tailor a program or content, whether it's videos, whether it's old radio shows, whether it's music, whether it's photos of family or otherwise meaningful, that's meaningful to a person. It can fill a day or a block of time that brings joy to the patient and that relieves the caregiver. So, and there's definitely some great stuff out there, and I'm partial, but it's a great application and use of mobile technology. So what are some of the advantages? Obviously, computers are consistent, and so they will do the same thing over and over and over again, and they will not grow angry or tired. So there's definitely an advantage there. It's coordinated, just like we saw in the graphic earlier. There are all sorts of things that can be coordinated on the fly by using mobile technology, and it is from the comfort of your home or wherever you are. So those are some of the clear benefits. Now, my cautionary notes, and then I'm going to wrap up. So obviously, you want to make sure that whoever is offering something, and especially when it involves devices, that these devices are safe and have been tested and are approved. And in most instances, that's the case. But with the explosion of companies offering products, you always want to ask yourself the question, is this safe and is it approved? Now, the second bullet is dear to my heart. They all are, but certainly the science part, and I think this is where digital health is way too young to meet some of the scientific standards that we have established. You want to ask yourself the question, whatever app it is, whether it's been proven effective and is beneficial. If an app is making the claim that they will improve your health or your mood or your wellness in whatever way, you want to ask yourself the question, who has used it? Did they like it? And did it work? Was it effective? Those are simple questions, but you do want to make sure that it's not something a person or a company is claiming, but rather that it is proven and tested. And some of those studies have yet to take place. It takes years to get good data. Security, where does my data go? It's great to have a cloud and to have all this information being shared and communicated, but you want to make sure that the data is safe and is handled properly. Now, the last 3 bullets I care deeply about. So in terms of usefulness, just because you may be not as tech savvy or you may not have a whole lot of technology experience doesn't mean you cannot ask the question, is this app meeting my need? And if an application is doing all sorts of things that you have no use for, it is totally fine to say, I don't think I need this. And conversely, you want to make sure that you look for something, that you ask yourself the question, what do I need? What am I looking for? And is this app meeting my need? If it is meeting a need, that's great, but it doesn't mean it's usable. A lot of applications are not specifically designed for older adults, and certainly not for older adults with a disability or with limitations. And normal aging comes with all sorts of physiological changes in motor function, in perception, in processing that warrant that an application is developed differently, larger text, different types of contrast, and it takes time to develop an application that is usable by a wide variety of people. So if you cannot use an app, that may not be because you are not the right user. It could very well be that the app was never properly developed and tested. So, and you don't have to accept that. And that really brings me to my last point on accessibility. Certainly when you are exploring apps for someone who has a disability or is limited cognitively or otherwise, you want to make sure that it is something that they can use and that has been developed specifically with disabilities and limitations in mind. And there are great resources out there that facilitate that. So that brings me to my last slide. If you are interested in technology but really kind of intimidated and not sure, there's a great group here in town called Blue Hair Technology Group. And on that picture you see Jane with one of her older participants, Jane Ratliff. She's the founder and director of Blue Hair. And they offer classes. You can host a class, and I think it is a great resource that I just wanted to share with you in closing in case you are interested but don't know where to go. And I'm going to leave it here for the sake of time.
Mm-hmm.